Hi folks, I'm Joel. I'm CTO here at Agility CMS. And this is the first in a new series on composable architectures. And we're going to start today by learning just what that is. What is a composable architecture? What do we mean when we say the word composable? How does composability work? What makes up the parts of a composability system? It's really exciting. This is cutting edge stuff, and this is where a lot of industries are going. Let's dive in. So what is composable? Let's start with this very basic, very simple sentence. Composability involves creating a solution by integrating various systems to meet specific user needs. The user in this case is you. You decide which components, which vendors you're going to use, which pieces of technology are going to make up your solution for your system. How does that work? How do you decide which components actually, which systems, which vendors actually are composable? Let's learn about what composability actually is so that we can help you make that decision. So by the start of it, I like to think of it as a piece of pie. And my whole solution, the 100% whole product that I'm going to need, is going to be made up of multiple pieces of the pie, which are other products, potentially other vendors. You can think of them as components or very modular kind of pieces, right? I might have a system where I need to have a CMS. I might have commerce because I'm going to sell online with my website potentially. I need to have search in there so that people can find things. And then I probably want to have analytics. That's a very basic sort of commerce retail site that might be there. Well, what makes each of those things truly composability? What is composability? All right. There's a few different things that I like to think of. Are the components modular? The modularity of those components is really important. Are they interoperable? Interoperability is key for composable. And there needs to be a layer of abstraction. And this is really key for some of the later videos that we're going to get to when we get deep into some more complex layers. Having components that are abstract really helps us kind of swap out things if we need to decide that maybe one component isn't what we want. We don't want to have to take everything apart. Let's dig into what these three aspects of true composability really mean. First, the idea of modular. The idea that I can swap things in and add different components to my system is where I get the idea of a modular system. This is the four component system that we first thought of, and this might be four different vendors, but we might add another vendor for personalization. And we didn't have to completely reinvent our system, but we can add that on as a component. And not everything can be a component. You can't add some completely different piece of technology that doesn't make any sense, but sometimes you can add certain kinds of things, and personalization is one of those things that you can add in there. But we can also take away. What if, oh, you know what, I'm not ready to sell things on my site yet, so I can take away the commerce side of things. And it's always good to do this in the architecture phase when you're deciding, okay, what actually is the digital property that I'm creating? What are all the aspects of it that it need? Then you can make these decisions. And we work with customers all the time to help them decide what are the pieces of the puzzle or pieces of the pie that they need to create their modular system. And it could even be as simple as, you know what, it's just a basic website. It has CMS, search, and analytics, and that's all. And you might not even have search. It could be super basic that you just start with CMS. Although I will say CMS does tend to be the center of most composable systems, but not always. Sometimes there's just a piece of commerce, portion in there, and then folks will add on search or analytics onto there. So CMS tends to be the central component, but sometimes not. All right, so let's go to the second piece of terminology that we're looking at, which is interoperable. All right, how do these things work and how can I swap them out? A true composable system will have parts of it that are always work the same in terms of what their capabilities are. So let's look at commerce for a second. So commerce, I'm going to expect it to list my products, probably do some kind of checkout, and maybe have some kind of inventory. There might be some other aspects of it there, but really those are the main interoperable pieces that I would expect a commerce vendor to provide as part of a composable system. And as long as you keep that in mind when the system is designed, I could swap out vendor X for vendor Y and put that in instead. Now, that's not always as easy as just changing the color of a piece of, on a pie chart there. But if you do think of it as what are the aspects of that system that are interoperable that need to connect with, what's the CMS? How does it connect with the search? How does it work with personalization? If it works pretty much the same way, then you can kind of swap it out. Now, in the real world practice, this isn't always as easy as it seems because of the differentiation that each of the vendors provide. And that's not always a bad thing. I think that the differentiation that Agility provides as a CMS is one of the best things about it. And other folks might copy that and then make it more interoperable. But in general, the things that are the same about each one of these composable pieces is the reason that you want to initially look at it and then look at the differentiation of those pieces so that you can see how are they going to be the best fit for your particular use case. Now, the next aspect is a similar kind of idea, looking at what are the abstract portions of these pieces of your puzzle that can work together and not have to look too much at how each individual thing works. So the abstract nature of these says, if I had no vendors at all, if there was just a definition of my analytics piece, my CMS piece, my commerce piece, what are the abstract aspects of those that are important to me as part of my solution that I need to put this all together as part of my composable piece? What I like about this idea of an abstract concept is it tries to take away too much of the feature creep that tends to happen and really plagued a lot of the monolithic or DXP type solutions that we've seen that folks are replacing now. Because if you have too many features that use that you're paying for, it really bogs down your system and it makes it really disadvantaged. Puts you at a disadvantage when you're trying to figure out how to replace that technology and even know what you're using. So the simpler the better for the most part, and then you can make sure that each piece of the puzzle is only doing what it needs to do for you as much as possible. So try to keep it abstract when you're thinking about it and don't get too deep into what does each brand promise before you've decided what are the abstract pieces that you need to have as your composable system. Now, I probably should have started talking about this first. There's a ton of advantages to a composable system. And I think the top four that I would pick, the number one is increased flexibility, right? I can swap out the components just like we swapped out the commerce, the sort of piece of the puzzle there because of whatever. So being able to take a piece out and put it back in, even at the architecture layer when we're first designing our system, is really valuable. If you're trying to find an all-in-one solution that does all of the things that you want, it's really going to be hard to do. It's going to take you a long time just to get the architecture and just to make a choice. In this case, you can start with the things that you need and work backwards from there to then find out for each individual component which vendor is going to be the right one for you. It's way faster to get to market with these things. The time to market for a composable solution is really fast. You can start immediately on just one component. Maybe it's just the CMS. Maybe it's just the commerce. You don't have to do the whole thing all in one project. So you can launch something, start getting results, get onto the new version of whatever it is that you're trying to do with your digital property and really get that out of the door quickly. This is where we work with customers a lot in how to drive their, I say, what, if you think of your project as a year, let's cut that in half. If you think of it as 6 months, let's cut that in half. Let's do 3 months. What can you do in 3 months or maybe even 6 weeks? What can we get out the door in 6 weeks? So we've gone from thinking about a year down to 6 weeks. What can we get out that actually will bring you value? A composable system is really good for getting the starting pieces of that. And then you look at what's phase 2, phase 3, and start getting those out the door as well. Your development costs are going to be a lot less on a solution like this, which seems counterintuitive because each one of these components does need to be implemented sometimes by developers. Sometimes there's API works that need to be connected together. But overall, the development costs are going to be way less because developers, first of all, they like working on these systems. And they're usually a lot more modern and they just work better. There aren't a lot of nuanced sort of different things that you'll get with a monolithic DXP, where it's sort of an all-in-one system where you have to learn how all of these things work. And usually there's a whole series of, education and strategy that you need to just do this particular to each one of those vendors. Composable systems, if you've got true interoperability and they're pretty abstract, then they tend to work really well together and it's a lot cheaper to build on. And on top of that, you can choose the best ones. If you're trying to find an all-in-one solution that has, hey, it has the CMS, it has commerce, it has all of these different pieces, is that going to be the best of each one of those? Usually when folks come to us, they've got something in mind for CMS, maybe something in mind for commerce or search or some other thing where, oh, I already work with this vendor. I want to keep working with them because they're really good. How can we add on to solve the kind of the rest of the pieces of that pie? That's where a composable system can work really well, has a ton of advantages. Now, this is just the first in our series. We're going to coming out with a few more different things about composability to help you learn how to put together your composable system that's going to be right for your solution.